If you're like me, you're having good days and bad days these days, and the bad days can some days feel worse. I don't know how many times I'm going to say it. Just some guy talking here, and today I want to talk about a very important state, and that is our emotional state. If you are struggling, if you feel like you're tired or hopeless or helpless, or just day to day things are harder, people are more aggravating, normal tasks seem impossible, maybe this message will help. I'm certainly not purporting to be able to fix whatever issue it is that you're going through. I certainly can't fix 2020. I've left my Yelp review like everybody else, but we've just got to get through it. And hopefully, this might help one or two of you to at least have a way to think about this. I want to share some of the ways that I evaluate or think about my mental state and emotional state and how I care for it. Before I do that, though, I would like to say that if you are in a dark place, if you are in a very difficult and lonely place, you are not alone. There are people around you who have struggled through and survived very difficult things as well, who are willing and able to help if you let them know that you need it. If nothing else, there are resources available. There's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I'll post the number in the description to the video below. But please reach out if you need help. Somebody will listen, I promise. And there is help out there. Don't let yourself go so far into a dark place that you feel like there are no options and that there's no help available to you. So, having said that, I always find it helpful to take some of these emotional issues and look at them with an analogy that really is not emotional, right? So, in this case, what's been helpful to me before is to think about my emotional state as a bank account with a debit card. So, we all tend to treat emotions like we have a limitless amount of them and we don't. Emotional energy is a finite resource. And so it's very much like a bank account. We make withdrawals from it, we put deposits in it, and we engage in transactions that we swipe our debit card for all day long. So those conversations that you have, those tasks that you do, all those things are emotional transactions. They require emotional energy, and usually those things are what I would call, withdrawals of emotional resources. And we do things if we're paying attention. We do things to recharge, right? To put more emotional resources, more emotional money in that account by self care, different things that we do that make us feel good, that make us feel better, people that interact with us that can actually give us some of those emotional resources back, share some of theirs with us. But one of the reasons why I think it's helpful to think about your emotional state from the perspective of a bank account is because it really is something that you have to budget. You don't have the emotional resources, most of us, to deal with everything that comes through all the time. And so you sometimes have to be very specific and deliberate about which things, which transactions you choose to participate in. There are people in our lives that require more of an emotional investment than others. There are some days when that interaction is one that is not going to be one that you can engage in based off of what the balance is in your account. That makes sense. So I'm not saying that you ignore people or that you just, stiff arm them, but you have to be cognizant of the fact that you have X amount of emotional energy and that if you're going to spend it on this, it's going to have an impact somewhere else in the budget. So, additionally, or likewise, if there is something coming up that you want to do, if there's a conversation that you need to have, and you identify that that will have an emotional cost, an emotional price, you can save for it. You can prepare for it. Like you would if you had a big day tomorrow, and so you got to get to bed early because you know that you have a finite amount of physical energy So you're going to rest up for that because you want to participate in an activity, or you know that tomorrow is going to be a hard day at work, or anything like that, right? So if you can see some of those emotional transactions coming, you can budget for them, you can save for them, you can make sure that you have enough emotional resource in the bank to participate in that particular transaction. You can also be a little bit more deliberate about, like I said earlier, recharging or refilling your account by doing things. If you know, again, like I said earlier, that you're going to have a hard day physically tomorrow, you put some, physical resource in the bank by having, a rest. Likewise, from an emotional perspective, you have to be aware that when you have a big expenditure coming, you should try to put stuff in the bank. You should avoid certain things that maybe will draw energy from you. You should do things for yourself. Everybody is unique and specific in what they need in terms of how to receive emotional energy. But you can be, again, deliberate about the fact that you need emotional resources for the transactions that you are choosing to engage in, and put that aside. Again, it's also important that you put emotional resources, emotional money aside to deal with the things that come up from a day-to-day perspective that are unforeseen, right? So we can't plan all these emotional expenditures ahead of time. There are things that happen, not necessarily the big tragic monumental things that happen sometimes in our lives, but the things that just happen from day to day. Something goes wrong, something doesn't go the way that you wanted it to, and you're going to need some, or somebody treats you a certain way, or you are forced into a particular situation, and you're going to need emotional resources to deal with that. um, so again, you need to plan for that. You need to try to make sure that you're not running hand to mouth when it comes to your emotional budget. So again, I know that that may seem simplistic, but for me, it's very helpful to take a step back and go, okay, what do my emotional accounts look like? Am I paying attention to what I'm spending these resources on? Am I getting enough in return for the investment that I am, making from an emotional resource perspective? If I'm not, there are things that I need to cut out of my life that I'm spending a disproportionate amount of emotional resources on and not getting enough back in terms of a return or value in my life. There are people like that in our lives. There are situations like that in our lives, our jobs, our living circumstances. There are times that we have to make decisions about um, our emotional output from an investment perspective. And I know it sounds weird to talk about emotions in such a business sort of way, but again, it's helpful for me to take a step back and treat these situations from a non emotional perspective, because I tend to be able to see uh, it a little clearer. And then finally, I want to make one final comparison to that bank account analogy, using that account analogy, right? So there are times when things drain our bank accounts without us knowing, right? Maybe we signed up for subscriptions that we forgot about, and so there's an amount of money that comes out every time that we're not paying attention anymore, but nevertheless has impact on our day-to-day budget for those resources. There are times when our accounts are hacked, right? So 2020 has been one of those years. There are a lot of things around us that we have to be aware are a drain on our emotional resources, whether we chose to spend that money, those resources on those things or not, right? There's stress in the air. There are people around us who are stressed. The environment is causing a lot of people to lose emotional resources that they may or may not be paying attention to. They may not be aware that this is a drain on your account. And so when they go to, do their normal day-to-day transactions, they suddenly find that they don't have enough to complete it, right? So that's why sometimes, that person in your life comes and says something that, yesterday or a few days ago or a month ago or a year ago, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But, suddenly that statement or that thing that they do or they say that is just minorly aggravating becomes this huge thing for you that just puts you over the edge because you're overdrawn, because you have you've exceeded your resources, because you haven't been maybe managing to the fact that these days you may need a little bit more self-care than you normally would at other times. Okay, I'll stop there because I'm, running a little long on time. But I hope that helps. Like I said, it doesn't solve your problems. It's not meant to solve your problems, but hopefully it's a way to look at things, maybe a tool or a mindset that you can use to manage some of the stresses that we're all having these days a little better in your own life right now. And again, this is just some guy talking, and I will talk to you next time.